Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices is made possible in part by Allstate, the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust, and CIBC.
Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. I'm Michael Puente, reporter with WBEZ Chicago. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us on our 50th show tonight. DACA recipients have been facing longer delays than normal in their status renewal. We hear from local groups working to address the issue. The importance of National Coming Out Day to local leaders in the Latino LGBTQ community.
It's just a beautiful mix of culture.
And a Chicago artist revels in Latin Americans' love for baseball with a tribute to Jose Abreu. First off tonight, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, better known as DACA, has long been giving immigrants who were brought here as youth an opportunity to work and study in the U.S. lawfully. But recently, DACA recipients have been reporting longer delays in the renewal of their status, putting many of their employment eligibility at risk, or in some cases, completely taking away their ability to work legally. Joining us to discuss the renewal delays and more are Alfredo Estrada, an attorney handling immigration cases and partner at Burke, Costanza, and Carberry, and Joanna James, program manager at Mano a Mano Family Resource Center. We also invited the agency handling DACA renewals, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, to join this conversation, but as of our recording time, we hadn't heard back. So welcome both of you to Latino Voices.
Thank you so much for having us.
Well, Alfredo, we'll start off with you as someone who works with clients having this issue. What have these longer waiting periods look like?
Well, currently we're looking at around 4 to 6 months for waiting, sometimes even longer, for DACA renewals. As you know, Michael, from July of this year, new applicants for DACA are not allowed to be adjudicated due to the court injunction. So we're seeing about 2 to 3 months extra for even a renewal to be adjudicated.
Joanna, from your perspective, how do these delays compare to normal waiting times?
Sure. The delay, like Alfredo just mentioned, is extreme. I mean, people are having to face circumstances just losing their jobs or having to put their life on hold because they're not able to obtain a work permit. And with any immigration service, there's always a bit of a waiting time, but now we're seeing over the last couple of months that time has just been increased.
Right. Well, we spoke with a recent graduate from the University of Illinois at Chicago who started her DACA renewal process back in March and up until now still hadn't received her new card. Take a listen.
I got a degree in chemical engineering, and so I was so happy to start my engineering career and just having delay after delay, like, okay, June, it should come in by July. Okay, maybe August, then September, now it's November. Now I'm like, maybe I just really hope that I can start by January. So this whole thing has been really frustrating and sad because I see how all of my friends, my classmates, they're moving forward with their careers, right? By January, they'll be like 6 months in.
Joanna, can you tell us a bit more about the effects these renewal delays are causing among these recipients?
Yes, I mean, a real life example right there with career changes, right? And so with DACA recipients, we know that right now the renewal time is 2 years. At one point during the Trump administration, it was even 1 year because of the policy that they had put in place. And so that financial burden on top of now the wait that DACA recipients have to go through just puts an extreme financial burden and overall pressure on how far they can plan out their lives. And so it's a constant stressor, and it's a constant point of having to wait and worry and feel like your life is so determined by this policy.
Well, Alfredo, with you handling so many of these DACA clients, what do you think is causing these delays? Have you found, too, also U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Agency being responsive during this time?
Well, listen, COVID's affected everything, right? From processing times with all applications. In processing centers here in the United States and consulate interviews abroad. But the cause of DACA recipients being in the position they are is because, Michael, frankly, our democracy is not working properly. We have the administration and executive branch trying to enforce immigration law, or create immigration law, and the judicial branch determining whether they are going outside their power. And this has been going on since the Obama administration. DACA is nothing new. And the cause for all this, Dreamers having DACA, having advanced parole, not having DACA, only be able to renew it, not having advanced parole, and now kind of having DACA, is because Congress has failed to, for over a decade now, or near a decade, enact any type of legislation to correct the situation. If there's anyone to blame and to put cause on this, it's really because Congress has failed to codify DACA, even though it's so popular amongst all Americans.
So, Alfredo, you actually put the blame squarely on Congress and not necessarily the president or even President Trump.
So, what we've been litigating whether DACA is something that can be determined or be found to be constitutional for years now. The Trump administration was taking away DACA, and organizations who didn't feel that was correct laid the groundwork for organizations now who feel DACA should be removed to challenge it. And the Fifth Circuit injunction has shown that we're going to continue to litigate this. And the easiest way, or at least the way it's supposed to rectify, is that Congress needs to codify a pathway to citizenship for all undocumented Americans, let alone DACA recipients or potential dreamers.
Well, Joanna, is there anything organizations like yours can do to help speed up the process for recipients?
Sure. So one of the many tools that we use in our toolbox is advocacy. So we can do a little about actually speeding up the process when it comes to response times. But one of the things that we can do to assist our clients is talk to their congressman, work with their congressman's office. One of the things that we use pretty frequently, that we always did, but we didn't have to use as frequently, are congressional inquiries. So it's a request that we work on with the congressman in our area in Round Lake. We work a lot with Congressman Schneider's office to submit these congressional inquiries so they can, in a way they're like checking in on the case, right? And so that's the way that we're able to advocate for our client.
Well, the parliamentarian recently ruled that a path to citizenship for Dreamers and other immigrants cannot be included in a legislative package, but some are still advocating for this. Here's Jennifer Teo again.
I really hope that people in Congress can really push towards having us TPS workers, essential workers, Dreamers on that bill, because even though DACA has helped so much, and I wouldn't be here without DACA, I need more security. I mean, I have been contributing well to society, and I know this country as my home, and I'd like to make that permanent without feeling, okay, like anytime now, they can just take away DACA. They have all my information. They can deport me to a country I don't know anything about much anymore.
Well, we got less than a minute left, but this question's for both of you. What permanent solutions do you hope to see in immigration reform? Alfredo, starting with you.
Well, I think we haven't seen comprehensive immigration reform in decades, right? So if I were getting a wish list, I would put together, a reenactment of INA 245I, a date that would come current to allow individuals to adjust status here, even though they don't have a lawful entry. Removal of the multiple bar inadmissibilities for immigrants who have to come to this country and return and then re-enter, and a removal of the 10-year bar for illegal or unlawful entry for immigrants.
Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. I apologize, Joanna. Our thanks to Alfredo Estrada and Joanna Jaimes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, local leaders on National Coming Out Day in the Latino community. Monday marks National Coming Out Day, an annual awareness day aimed at supporting lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. What does the Awareness Day mean for leaders in the Latino LGBT community? Joining us to answer that and more are Julio Rodriguez, the co-founder and board president of ALMA, the oldest Latinx Latin LGBTQ organization in the Midwest and one of the oldest in the country, and David Ernesto Munara, the president and CEO of Howard Brown Health. Welcome to both of you to Latino Voices.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, this question is for both of you. What does Coming Out Day mean to both of you? Let's start with you, Julio.
To me, it's an opportunity to bring visibility to our community. I think oftentimes people associate the gay community with one demographic. And I think Coming Out Day, at least for us, is about really expanding the definition of who is in that community, and in particular, the Latinx community and the contributions and the things that we think are oftentimes not noted in history around the accomplishments and where our movement is within the larger LGBTQ movement. So that's what coming out means to me. It's about visibility and acknowledging the contributions of our community.
And you, David?
Yeah, for me, Coming Out Day is a reminder that being LGBTQ for many is an invisible identity. And so, that over, many years has meant that people can lean on stereotypes and prejudices about the LGBTQ community and do so without knowing an LGBT person or somebody, and in many cases they do. And so, the Stonewall movement that gave rise to the modern day LGBTQ liberation movement in 1969 was a riot against police persecution. And from that from that riot in New York City, this movement to come out began to say, we're going to stand proud in our identity as LGBTQ people, as queer people. We're going to tell the world, we're going to tell our families, we're going to tell our employers, we're going to march in parades, which, this is why, the annual LGBTQ liberation, celebration is called Pride. It's because of taking this action to say, these are not just invisible stereotypes that you can persecute, but these are actual real human beings. And real human beings that, maybe in your family, in your workplace, in your community. And we deserve, rights and visibility and respect.
Well, David, let's stay with you. Are there difficulties specific to the Latino community when it comes to coming out?
Well, I think for everybody who's LGBTQ, there are intersectional issues. And so, nobody is one thing, I think this is really true for the Latinx community, the Latin community is also really diverse. And so, we're comprised of different nationalities, different ethnicities, different generations. Some of us are immigrants, some of us are undocumented, some of us have assimilated, some of us are bilingual, and some of us are monolingual. And so I think that adds texture to the LGBTQ experience. And it also compounds some of the challenges that some of our peers experience because of their lack of social capital and some of the challenges that they face if they're, for example, if they're undocumented or they're recent immigrants. It makes it harder for them. And for some it can really compound some of the challenges in the world, like our transgender brothers and sisters, where there's so much stigma and discrimination.
Well, earlier this year, a major figure in the LGBTQ community, Roman Buenorsto, also co-founder of ALMA, passed away. Julio, can you speak a bit on his legacy?
Yeah, I think Roman actually is the sort of the model, if you will, for coming out. I mean, his courage, even from a young age, we just did a memorial to him. And even when he was young and he was faced with, really discrimination and to some degree a threat to his own life, rather than retreating, he actually realized that it was even more important to embrace who he was fully. And I think he really not only embraced who he was, but then he took it a step further, which was to reach out to other people who may not have had the same courage and really help to be a mentor and a guide for them in coming out.
Alma did a documentary about how Latinos in the LGBTQ community have been disproportionately affected by COVID. Julio, can you give us a little bit of how the community has been affected by COVID?
Well, you hear a lot about sort of the essential workers. And I think oftentimes people forget, yes, that is true, that it's the Latino community. But then when you look at the LGBT or queer community, you don't even realize how more intense that is. In our documentary, we really captured, folks who, they don't have a choice about whether they go to work or the types of jobs they have. As David mentioned, the trans community in particular, oftentimes people forget that they're forced to go into occupations that aren't their choice. They're chosen for them as a result of discrimination. And I think what this documentary really shows is not only some of the challenges that our community faces, particularly around homelessness, around the lack of job opportunities, around just being visible, so that when we get these blanketed titles of essential workers, people don't really understand what that means for somebody who's working at a food processing plant and realizing that you have one mask that you have to wear for the whole week. And that's not a choice whether you get to walk off the job or not.
We've got about 20 seconds left. David, how has Howard Brown been working with the Latino community members on some of the issues Julio just mentioned?
Yeah, so Howard Brown has been active in the fight against COVID. We were one of the first entities to start COVID testing on the West Side, and we actually documented extremely high rates of COVID prevalence in the Little Village neighborhood. And it's exactly the dynamics that Julio was describing, people living in crowded conditions, working in factory or work or essential work where they were not protected adequately. So we've been doing vaccinations. We do full spectrum primary care, sexual health, behavioral health, and citywide. And our anchor Latino, or our biggest Latino providers in the Humboldt Park area.
All right. Well, our thanks to Julio Rodriguez and David Ernesto Munar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, a look at the impact of Latino players on the White Sox. The face of America's pastime has become increasingly Latino over the past few decades as Major League Baseball has stepped up its recruitment from Caribbean and South and Central American countries. The result has been a deep intertwining of cultures. This year, the White Sox asked 3 Chicago artists to create murals inspired by the White Sox that celebrate diversity in baseball. Here's a look at the mural created by artist Ascend that pays tribute to Jose Abreu's journey from the streets of Cienfuegos to first base at Sox Park.
I think what was important to me was to show the story from beginning to where it's now. So showing Cuba, showing where he was born, that's actually, a street, an interpretation of a street in Cienfuegos, where he's from.
In this mural by Chicago artist Ascend, a larger-than-life Jose Abreu swings his mighty bat under the Cienfuegos streetlights of his childhood.
I love his hustle, I love his commitment, his laser focus, and I love his humbleness. He comes from humble beginnings. I wanted to show the housing, the cars, just everything that surrounded him as a child, because that's what really molded him to be here.
Ascend's dreamlike rendering is one of 3 murals commissioned by the White Sox as part of their Game Changers series. The series throws a spotlight on the contributions of underrepresented communities. The mural was unveiled at Guaranteed Rate Field in September and has been on display there since then.
We wanted to create a series, a way to really use our platform to celebrate those voices and creativity. Diversity is part of the White Sox history. Minnie Minoso was Mr. White Sox here. He was synonymous with the White Sox brand, and he was a native to Cuba. He was a mentor and a dear friend to Jose Abreu.
Ascend was born in Venezuela and played baseball himself for years.
As a Latino, anyone who made the majors from our country, you were a fan of that team. In our case, it was Ozzie, 80s and 90s, and I was a Sox fan over there, We immigrated to Chicago in '95. I was 13, and we moved to the South Side, and just continued my love for the Sox here.
To Ascend, baseball and players like Jose Abreu beautifully blur the lines between American culture and Latinidad.
I love seeing the diversity within even Latino players, because it's good to see it all together, in a baseball field. In a dugout, you're going to have American players, you're going to have Cuban, Venezuelan, Puerto Rican, and it's all just a big family. It's a part of culture, especially for Latin Americans. For us, it's something that we do as kids, and we take into adults. And we share games with our family, we share, baseball is more than just a game.
For Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And the White Sox say they plan to use the murals to raise money for local nonprofits supporting the Game Changes mission after the season ends. And you can get a look at the other murals in tonight's Black Voices and next week on Chicago Tonight. And as you just heard, the history of Latino players with the Sox goes way back. This week, Chicago Tonight spoke with Adrian Burgos Jr., a history professor at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, about the impact of Latino players in baseball. Burgos shared what he thinks set some of these players apart.
They all play with this desire, but also this joy. I think that what often has caused some strife for a lot of folks who are not Latino in baseball is that Latinos are exuberant. They celebrate their achievements. They celebrate their teammates' achievement, partly because many of these ball players are coming from countries and societies that have been torn apart by political strife, by economic turmoil. And to be a major leaguer, to realize that dream, it's like to celebrate life for them. Like, they made it. They have the opportunity to play in the strongest league in the world, League Baseball, and to excel.
To watch the full conversation on the impact of Latino players in baseball and on Chicago's South Side, please visit our website. Before we leave tonight, we've reached a milestone here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. This is our 50th show since our debut last fall. Here's a look back at some of our favorite moments.
We often have been erased from the history. We often have been erased from the narrative.
My teaching focus changed from knowing what matters to asking what matters.
Without helping everyone move forward, we're going to stay behind.
We can definitely change the trajectory of what is happening to our neighborhood.
We can't be fighting one another. Instead, we need to fight the system that's oppressing us both.
And cleaning the air, especially in these hard-hit communities.
Communities like La Villita, like Cicero, these are environmental risk factors that are impacting our health.
Latino families, and especially Latino women, have been disproportionately affected by the economic downturn.
The stakeholders that make these policies that impact our communities are not from our community.
People with lived experience need to be in the forefront on making decisions that impact their community and their city.
The authority to govern comes from the people who are governed, and that all those people are equal under the law.
Organizing is a legal process protected by the law.
Y nosotros nos preguntamos, ¿realmente la comunidad necesita eso?
I'm proud of it because these are the Latinos that have made a difference.
A mí mi visión es de que aquí tengo mi oportunidad para mi vejez.
Their visions for their shared kitchen continues to grow. They're hoping to buy this lot to expand their commercial kitchen.
We're very Chicago, very American, very urban.
In a city like this, in a city full of opportunity,
they can still feel that camaraderie is really healing to a lot of veterans.
But they are doing regular activities as if they were alive, because to us it is an extension of life.
In making flowers, you are able to have control and you end up with something beautiful.
So the sky's the limit. As long as there's people willing to put the work in, this space is for everyone.
And our thanks to you, our viewers, for being part of Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices. And that's our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Latino Voices and Black Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And you can catch my reporting on 91.5 FM WBEZ. Next week on Latino Voices, my friend Marisa Parra with CBS2 Chicago will be here in the host chair. Now for all of us at Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, I'm Michael Puente. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.